You get to work on Monday. Buddy comes up to you, says, "Man, you should have seen what happened there. What a miracle." Before we figure out what he meant, when you hear that was a miracle. What does that mean? Now, as you listen to the guy, you wonder, did he this weekend escape from like a head-on collision? He thought for sure, I'm a goner, and then the car swerved, and he's like, "Oh, you should have seen it." Or maybe it was something like his favorite football team. It's the middle of football season, fourth quarter, down by 3 touchdowns, 8 minutes to go, and they come back on a Hail Mary, right? And or maybe he's about to tell you one of his kids, got a job, 1,000 applicants for one job, and his son got it, his daughter got it, and he'd say, "Man, it was a miracle," right? Why is it a miracle? Because it's unexpected, unexplainable, and probably never happen again. If you tried it all over again, you wouldn't get the same result. That's what a miracle is. Well, what would you say if I told you that our God is the God of miracles? You better get ready, because I've got some amazing things to share with you on that is what God is like. I'm Brian, Faith Fits Psalms, and I'm happy you're with me today. And this is my 4th video on the series That is Like God, called Part 3. There's an intro, and then there's 3. I'm up to Part 3 now. And we're going to be looking at Psalm 86, verses 8 through 10. It's like, well, I thought you were going to talk about miracles. Yeah, I'm going to introduce our God as the God of miracles, and then we're going to look at 2. And I'm just maybe giving you a little warning, a disclaimer. It's going to be hard to believe this stuff, but it's all true. That's what a miracle is. It's something that's like, wow, I want to believe that, and that's amazing, but really? Yeah, really. That is what God is like. Okay, so here we are. Psalm 86, verses 8 through 10. Nowhere among the pagan gods is there a God like you, O Lord. There are no other miracles like yours. All creation, all the nations, and you made each one, by the way, will come and bow before you. They will praise your great and holy name, for you are great. You may recognize that from one of the other ones. And perform great miracles. You alone are God. Our God can be described. What is God like? That is what God is like. He's the God of miracles. So we're going to look at a couple of miracles. One from the Old Testament in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 6 and 7. And then we'll jump over to the New Testament so you know it's not all from like 2,000, 3,000 years ago. It happened in the time of Jesus, and trust me, you serve God, you'll see miracles too. Maybe in you, to you, for you, on your behalf, and then God will use you. So let's look at some stories here. I'm just going to look at these briefly. I'll kind of give you the BGD version. I'm actually reading from the New Living Translation, the original version from 1997. And I can prove that, yeah, that looks like a Bible from 1997. But I'm doing it, the New Living Translation, but also the BGD version. BGG happened to be my initials, and so I kind of ad-lib a little bit here and there, but true to the scriptures, but I'm telling a story here. So here we are. It's the time of Elisha. He's a prophet, and the king of Aram has come and besieged the city and the capital of Israel, which was Samaria at the time. This is chapter 6 in the book of 2 Kings, Old Testament, verse 24. As a result of this besieging, no one could get in, no one could get out. a great famine took place in the city to a point where even a donkey's head sold for 2 pounds of silver. I've never been that hungry. Okay, a donkey's head, I'm going to pass. And a cup of dove's dung, oops, cost about 2 ounces of silver. So one day the king is walking around. He's distraught, obviously. He's the king of a besieged city. And some lady reaches out and says, "Hey, Lord, my king, help me, help me." And he says, "Well, what do you want me to do? What can I do for you?" And she goes, "Well," and this is a woman saying, "This other woman proposed," oh, this is really terrible. Verse 28, "that we eat my son one day, and then the next day we'll eat her son in order to survive." That's obviously what you call cannibalism. That's how bad it is. And so we did. We ate my son yesterday, and today's today. And now she's saying the deal's off, that she's not going to do it. She's hitting him. "Help me, king." How would you like to be the king? He's like, he was so angry of the situation and that they had to resort to cannibalism. He is so angry now at Elijah. Elijah has nothing to do with it. He's the prophet of God. But he's got to blame somebody because he's not going to take personal blame for it. So they go get Elijah, and Elijah says this in chapter 7. "Hear this message from the Lord," verse 1. This is what the Lord says. "By this time tomorrow, in the markets, 5 quarts of fine flour will be only a half an ounce." Well, wait a minute. There was a donkey's head. That was going to be a bunch of silver. Then dove's dung. Now you're going to get legitimate food. 5 quarts of fine flour. There's none to be found for only half an ounce. And 10 quarts of barley grain will only cost a half an ounce. So the officer who was assisting the king said, "Ha ha, that can't happen. Even if the Lord would have opened the windows of heaven, impossible." So Elijah says, "Oh yeah, you'll see it happen, but you won't be able to eat any of it." In the meantime, you got these 4 lepers, and so they're already outcast. And they look around to each other and said, "Hey, we're dying of starvation here. If we go into the city, of course, we're not welcome there because not only is there famine, but we got leprosy. So we go there, we're going to die. We go here, we're going to die. Well, let's go to the Arameans who have surrounded Samaria, and let's see if maybe they have a little mercy." And they thought, what's the worst thing they could do? Kill us? Well, we're going to die anyway. So off they go. And so they get there. In verse 5, that evening they went out to the camp. And funny, no one was there. Because the Lord had caused that army to hear the clatter of speeding chariots and galloping horses. So they thought an invading army was coming in. So they took off. I mean, they just fled right on the spot. And so they figured the king of Israel hired the Egyptians. So they panicked and fled. They abandoned their tents, their horses, their donkeys, and everything. They just fled for their lives. Now, of course, the lepers didn't know that, but when they showed up, there were the tents, there were the donkeys tethered to a post, and it was just, everything's there. And so they start eating and drinking wine, and they're like, "Oh, this is amazing." And then they come to the right mind, their senses, and they say, "I don't think this is really fair. Now, we're eating like kings and pigs even, and our city is starving, and we might get in big trouble if we don't kind of tell them the news." So they go back, and king gets roused up from bed and say, "Hey, we got these 4 lepers saying that Aram, they took off and everything's just ripe for our plunder." So the king's like, "Too good to be true. Nah, I know what they did. Aram snuck away, and they went a little far from their camp, figuring that we'd discover that, we'd come out of the city, and then they'll just attack us. So it's a trap. It's an ambush. So one of his attendants says, well, sir, I mean, I don't really want to correct you because it might cost me my head, but what's the worst that we can do? We send out a couple of our soldiers and our horses, and if they don't come back, well, then we're going to die anyway. So he said, all right, go ahead. And those people go out, they go to the camp, they find it just like the lepers, and they go a little further, and they see plunder and people dropping things all the way to the Jordan River. I mean, that the king of Aram just took off. So, of course, they come back and say, King, it's true. And wouldn't you know it, in verse 16, so it was true that 5 quarts of flour were sold that day for half an ounce, 10 quarts of barley grain. Now, in the meantime, so just what Elijah said the day before, the king appointed that officer that said, it couldn't happen even if the windows of heaven opened. And the king appointed his officer to control the traffic at the gate, because you can imagine people weren't waiting in line. They just stampeded. And guess what happened? He tried to control the traffic. He got stampeded. He got trampled to death. So everything that Elijah said would happen, happened. There was abundance of food the next day. And the guy that mocked God, he saw it, but he didn't partake of it. Now that is a miracle. That is what God is like. You can go back and read that yourself. Look at it and go, don't try that at home, right? It's a miracle. There's no one like the God that we serve, the God of miracles of power. All the nations are going to come to worship him. So now we're going to jump over to the book of Mark. And then we're going to see Jesus here. And another miracle. This is a little less dramatic, you might say, from cannibalism to a feast and famine to feast. But nonetheless, wait until you see this. We're in Mark chapter 4. Jesus is ministering to people, healing the sick, raising the dead, preaching the good news of the kingdom. And as evening came, in chapter 4, verse 35, Jesus says to the disciples, let's go over to the other side of the lake. Let's get away from the crowds, get a little peace and quiet. So he was already in the boat because he had been preaching from the boat. And they left the crowds. And soon a fierce storm arose, high waves. They began to break into the boat, and the boat was nearly full of water. And these were some of these guys, some of the disciples who were experienced fishermen, and they started to freak out. And they're like, Lord, help! Well, Jesus is in the boat, right? So why are they yelling? Well, they're afraid. There's a storm. The water's coming in the boat, and every time a wave comes over the boat, it's like we're that much closer to going under and drowning. And verse 38, Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. He was in complete peace. He's also exhausted. Teacher, wake up! Don't you even care? We're going to drown. Verse 39, when he wakes up, he stands up and he rebukes the wind and says to the water, hush, be still. Quiet down. Suddenly, the wind stopped. And there was a calm. And then he looked at him and said, hey, what's the problem? Why are we so afraid? Did you have no faith in me? And they were filled with awe. They said among themselves, who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him? Who is this? That is what God is like. Now you know there's a bunch of miracles there. Wind, hush, be still. So, water, be calm. Now, you got to understand when there's been waves going up and down, even if the wind stopped, how long would it take for those waves to subside? Well, take a bucket of water and shake it for a while and then stop. Does it just go flat? No, 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 no. It takes a while. And the bigger the body of water, the longer it takes. He hushed the wind and calmed the water. That is what our God is like, the God of the miracles. I told you it was going to be hard to believe, but it's all true. And I want you to stand in awe of him, love him, and go ahead and pray and say, Lord, show me a miracle. Do a miracle in my life. Use me to do a miracle. That's what our God is like. He's a God to be boasted about. He's a God of love. He's a God that cares about you. He's a God that's intimate and full of awe. And guess what? That's only one story in the New Testament, one story in the Old Testament. If you had more time, I got more stories. So keep tuning in for part 4 and 5. I don't know how long I'm going to go, but I'm going to keep on going till I exhaust myself. But I really don't get exhausted bragging on God because he's the God of miracles. That is what God is like. I speak peace to you. Have a great week, month, wherever you're at, and keep checking in. I'll see you again. Peace.